Well, there's a number of things going on right now that haven't gone on for the previous decade. When we were at zero rates in government bonds around the world, or negative rates, there was a much different a list of things to focus on than what we have now. And now that we have rates back up to the highs of the past decade, or more into the zone of where we were pre-zero rate regime, we have a number of things. And one of the main things that is of a focus is the amount of supply coming in government bonds and the demand for government bonds as well. So we have GDP growing, we have full employment, and yet the deficits are still growing. It's a very unusual trifecta, because typically when GDP grows and you're at full employment, your tax base is improving and your deficits are declining. But that's not what's happening right now, and that's a disturbing trend that everyone's dealing with, and particularly in the United States. The interest expense is growing so rapidly. I think it was 2%. It was forecast to be 2% of GDP this year, or last year. It's expected to be 4% of GDP in 7 years. So that's just the interest expense alone. The actual deficit itself is going to be 1.7 trillion next year, 1.9 the year after is what's forecast. And as a percentage of GDP, the forecasts are going something to the tune of from 96% to 123% over the next decade, with no end in sight. And this is where at some point the fiscal situation has to be altered. And it's not really I'm not here to blame a specific political party, since it's been constantly growing, but it has exploded in recent times. And some of that was a reaction to COVID. Some of it was a reaction to control of government afterwards, and a lot of pressure to get a lot of things funded that were long sought after. And I think that the hard realities of being indebted and having to choose down the road of, do we pay our interest, which you have to, our interest expense, or do we have to shrink our military budget, or do we have to shrink our education budget? And so these are the types of crowding out battles that will occur, and they're not going to be fun battles. So that sort of that dynamic brings tons of supply into the marketplace, government supply, because to fund the government's activities, they have to increase the supply dramatically. And it's in the next year and a half, it's going up a lot, and likely to continue to go up for even further. On top of that, demand is lessening. And by demand, quantitative tightening is a reduction in demand. Because if you build up your balance sheet to 9 trillion, and then you are intending to shrink it to, say, 6 trillion over a couple of years, that means you don't keep buying more treasuries in the marketplace to keep it at 9 trillion. As your existing holdings mature, you get coupon payments and whatnot, drawing it down. So they are drawing that down. So who's buying that extra 3 trillion over a couple of years? That is demand that's lessening. Foreign official institutions, so many countries find themselves in a very similar situation, that foreign official institutions are either trying to sell treasuries to finance intervention, or they have their own problems themselves. Pensions are starting to strip, are slowing their stripping, which is demand for long bonds. Money managers got fully long after SVB because they all thought we'd have a recession. And so with SVB, they said, "Oh, banking crisis and recession." They got fully long at like a 3.5% more, a 3.5% yield on, say, 5 and 10s. And now they're 100 basis points or so underwater. And with that, they're they're holding on, but they're not adding at this point. And
so who's going to buy?
That is the question. And, CTAs are very short. The hope right now for the immediate is that they buy, and hedge funds, but that's not a long lasting buyer. And so as a result of the answer to your question is yields should go higher. You hear the government and Fed officials and such talk about it as the term premium. It's where would you buy the next trillion? You demand a greater yield to take down the greater supply. And as that happens, and it can happen quickly, it can happen slowly, depends what else is going on. But as that happens, that it's almost like water dripping in a tub that's stopped, and it could drip for a long time until it starts to overflow, and then it starts to become a problem.